Hey guys, this is Nomi Kantz with TYT Politics, and we are so lucky to have an old friend of ours, Kai Newkirk, who is the mission director and co-founder of Democracy Spring. He is fresh out of jail, where he spent a couple of nights after a protest protesting Jeff Sessions. Kai, thanks for joining us.
So great to be with you. We love you. We love what you do. Thank you.
So, okay, you just got out of jail. We'll get to like what it's like to be in jail because you've done this a few times before. In fact, I think the last time I saw you, you were just fresh out of getting arrested. What did you do this time?
Um, I went with one other leader from Democracy Spring and a group of six folks from NAACP to Senator Jeff Sessions' office in the Russell Senate office building, and we went in and just respectfully requested a meeting with the senator or senior staff. We knew that the um, his confirmation hearing was beginning shortly, so we knew it'd be tough to get to him. But we wanted to talk to somebody about our concerns, especially around his record of opposing voting rights and voting rights protections, and ask him to remove, himself from nomination for Attorney General, because in our view, that makes him radically unfit for the job. We didn't expect them to honor that, but we felt it was the right thing to do, and so we wanted to make the request. And we said, um, after it was rebuffed, that unless he came or someone came, that we would stay there um, indefinitely. So then we sat down in the office and gave him a little time, and then we started singing a song, a freedom song, and then doing a chant. Um, I believe that we will win, I think was what we started with. And then the police showed up and said, y'all need to leave. And we refused to. Some people backed out that were there doing social media, or in support roles. But those of us that were prepared to risk arrest held our ground. We continued sitting in and with the chants, with the songs, until they arrested us one by one. It all happened pretty quickly. Sometimes these things go longer, sometimes they don't. But pretty quickly, we were escorted out. But before then, there were a lot of cameras that were around there, and boom, they just kind of jammed into the office. Folks that were there for the hearing, and got us as we were being escorted out. And then we were held for 8 to 10 hours or so before being released.
So you were held in the jail.
At the Capitol Police Station, Capitol Hill Police Station.
Now you've done this a couple of times now.
Hmm.
You staged last year. I think a lot of people remember that you staged Democracy Spring staged a big event at the Capitol. Was it the largest event protesting campaign finance?
The largest civil disobedience action in America in the 21st century, at least arguably. Over 1,300 arrests over the course of a week, which was incredible. And the first day, I think, was the largest number of people arrested at the U.S. Capitol ever in one day. It was over 400, and preceded by a march from the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia to D.C.
Cenk, our founder and of course the host, was arrested, and Rosario
Oh, he
Dawson.
was,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, he was great. He sat in on the first day. There were a lot of folks from the TYT Army and Wolfpack there. That was really amazing to see that people really, I think, as I believe they would be. I said, Cenk, if you say you're going to do this and you tell your people that you're going to do this, then they'll really show up. And that kind of leadership by example, I think, was really proven there, and that was really powerful. And we're honored to be working with Cenk. And I think also, I mean, TYT did the best coverage, in terms of, where the curve, meets of reaching a lot of people and then just being there and doing lots of great in-depth coverage and really treating it as the important historic thing that it was, and relevant to such a crisis in our country as whether we are going to live in a democracy or not. I think TYT was amazing.
Democracy Spring has a very creative mission. You have these amazing um, strategies for civil disobedience and peaceful disobedience, and and it's really creative. But we do live in an era now. You mentioned coverage, where it seems like these types of actions 20 years ago would get a lot more attention. And it's almost like they're intentionally blocked out until it reaches a point where the media can't, ignore it anymore. I mean, literally, Standing Rock had to
Hmm.
have like 10,000 people there for CNN to show up, and there needed to be a standoff, which is it's shocking to me. So how is it that you guys strategize not just the actions but getting the awareness? Because a lot of this does involve shaming, people of power, and if you can't get the attention, how do you shame them?
Well, I think it's a challenge. I mean, if you're looking at today compared to, say, 1965, right? Probably one of the most iconic moments in nonviolent struggle in our country, the Selma to Montgomery March and the Civil Rights Movement, that Bloody Sunday when they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, right? That's probably, you know, archetypal of major media coverage of nonviolent direct action in what many people would consider the heyday, the 60s or 70s, right? So there's some benefits then in that to many people, maybe it's less familiar, including the media, right? So the novelty factor might be stronger with some tactics, right? But we can always try to innovate tactically. But there are some things that are basic and powerful and that really are worth continuing to try. But then so the New York Times, if they cover it, or CBS, you're going to reach so many people because it's a very centralized media landscape. But it's really tough to break through to that level. Nowadays, we can reach so many people independently through social media, right? And there's a much more diverse media landscape that is, in some ways, really segregated between different communities and different views and so on, and so crowded with so many different outlets. But it also gives you so many opportunities to begin to get coverage, right? And to produce your own in a way that was not possible at all then. Facebook Live, you could do a video and goes viral, and get hundreds of thousands of views, right? So I think it's a challenge, in terms of breaking through to become, kind of legitimized as a major story by the corporate media, the mainstream media, and so on, a critical mass there. I think that may be more challenging now because there's just so much happening. And many protests don't really push the envelope in terms of disruption or sacrifice, which are the two kind of elements strategically that we see as essential to create that really compelling connection for people. But I felt like, and a lot of times I think what we're doing is we're kind of building up. We're kind of building up against that resistance to cover something until we break through, and I felt like at the, in April when we were doing the mass sit-ins that we're sort of pouring water into a bucket and it was getting close to overflowing to where CNN felt like they needed to be there. But we weren't able for various reasons to sustain it beyond that first week that we had prepared to do so. But in Standing Rock case, you see that dynamic of persistence and escalation over time made it so that they couldn't ignore it. As you said, Occupy Wall Street, right? Became a worldwide phenomenon, cover of Time magazine. That's emblematic of breaking through in the mainstream, right? But for the first couple of weeks, it was ridiculed if covered at all, and they persisted. They continued, they escalated, and after you saw some crackdown from the NYPD and then continue to grow, then it broke through. So I think we have to be really careful not to buy into a narrative that's there among some on the left, that the corporate media will just never cover anything that we do. It's just factually not true. They're an institution that can be pulled and forced to do things like any other, and it's not monolithic, right? You've got somebody like Van Jones, who was a booster for what we're doing at CNN, and so that's the case across the board. We can do it.
So there's one. One guy at all of CNN, someone who's been on CNN a lot. Van's doing great work, and I don't know how he gets away with it.
Yes, yes. Just saying they're not monolithic institutions, that there are people that are pushing and have different incentives even within them, and we have to exploit those as an organization, as a movement.
So just getting back to what Democracy Spring is and
Sure.
how, this is a time when so many people want to be part of the resistance, the persistence, whatever you want to call it. People are stepping up that may have never been interested in protesting. They're learning a lot as they go. They're engaged. News readerships, viewership on cable news networks is hitting all-time highs, and it's because people want to be informed, engaged, and involved. You guys are doing tremendous work. What can just an average person, if they can't join Democracy Spring, or if they just want to go organize something on their own, or if they do want to join Democracy Spring, what are some of the things that they can do to get engaged?
Absolutely. I mean, we are trying to build a grassroots nonviolent army around the country that can organize actions and campaigns in every state and DC around this fundamental issue of whether we're going to be a democracy for all or a plutocracy for the few. We want to end the corruption of big money in politics and voter suppression and have a government that's truly of, by, and for the people. And we don't think you can do that without a mass nonviolent movement. Um, and we've really had to adjust our strategy after the election. You know, we were hoping that we would be able to escalate like we did in April of last year to try to force through federal reform, around a democracy this year. But with Trump's election, which is a catastrophe for catastrophe for our country, we've really had to come back and reevaluate our strategy, and we're in the final stages of that, and going to be rolling that out and be able to organize at a new level now. But I think that, for me, our only hope in this Trump era is for kind of a movement renaissance that brings millions of people into action who never were before, who never saw themselves as activists, who never thought they were needed, who never thought they had the power to really contribute and make a difference. And we want to be one of the homes for those people that can support them. If they're ready to step up and risk arrest or do a march or do an occupation, that's awesome. If they want to start by making phone calls to Congress, producing social media content, we need all of those. And one of our principles is that we appreciate every hand on the plow and every contribution, regardless of how great it is. And that we create a community that helps us all step up and keep making greater contributions. And so folks can go to democracyspring.org and sign up and let us know how they want to be involved, where they're at. We've got supporters and leaders across the country that you can work with. Follow on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the usual, and plug in. And we want to continue to build. In the next weeks, I think we'll be kind of announcing and initiating some new steps, some campaigns that we're going to do to build on this moment. But we first had to really do an adjustment as the whole political, landscape had shifted. And we've done some things that we were clear it was right to do, even as we were figuring that out, like challenging the Electoral College vote, trying to disrupt the inauguration, things like that, intervening on Keith Ellison's behalf for the DNC chair. But if we're going to enable people to take independent, creative, autonomous action across the country, then we need to be able to provide that strategic framework, and that's what we're doing now.
If this grows to, I guess the question is, how do you measure when something has actually played when one of your strategies has actually made a difference, whether it's over time or it's had impact? Like, you guys hit record numbers last year when you were protesting money in politics, but we still have money in politics. So, like, how do you gauge what's a success and what's not a success?
That's a great question. I think, we get tricked up on this a lot in the movement, and how we think about victory. Our theory of change is that movements win by mobilizing a critical mass of active public support for our cause. And we show that by the sympathy of a majority, which you can measure through polls and things like that, and the active participation of a critical mass, which we need millions in our country. And so if we do an action sometimes or a campaign, there may be sort of an external thing that we're trying to get to happen, like a statement from, an elected official or legislation or something like that, or them to, remove, something like when people were protesting the first Muslim ban, seeing the court victory on that was huge, right? And then seeing Trump back down on the green card and so on. So you're going to see some of that, but we're always keeping our eye focus on is the prize of the public. Where's the public at? What's happening there? Are we seeing a shift in polls? Are we seeing lots of new people become involved, right? And people step up their level of involvement. And that can be, when you're getting tons of media coverage, that's generally a sign, right, that that's happening. But you can judge it in other ways. And in the April mobilization, last year after the mass sit-ins, we did see some signs of external shift, right? The Democrats in Congress. It was over 100 that signed on to a letter calling for hearings on all of the bills that we were pushing for, right? And I think that's one of the major things we saw, and that was reflected also in the DNC and the platform, which incorporated basically all the things that we were pushing for. And I think that what we've seen in the last few years is a consolidation in the Democratic Party in principle in favor of all these reforms, right? They didn't in the past necessarily say that they were for overturning Citizens United, that they were going to push hard for voting rights, or that they were there for public finance, right? The fact that they're saying it now is a victory. Now is the question, are you actually going to deliver, right? And so that'll need to be tested in states where the Democrats are in control, like California and others. And I think increasingly in how the Democrats actually fund their own organization and fund their campaigns, right? Are they going to do so in a way that's consistent with that?
Are you at Democracy Spring? Do you have a list of folks you know that are more, or even like a union would when they endorse somebody, they kind of send out questionnaires and they have them on a scale of like 1 to 10. This is how friendly they are to our agenda. Do you have something like that with, especially the Democrats?
Yeah. Well, we did something, we called it the Equal Voice for All Declaration, leading into the 2016 election, which basically committed folks to fight for democracy reform. And in that case, we were going out to elected officials, at various levels, to ask them to sign on to or to speak in favor of it. And there were many that did. And at that time, we were kind of promoting that list throughout the organization as a basis for people to decide where to put their energy in the home stretch of the election in terms of trying to, turn out support for those. And then folks that didn't sign it were clearly on the wrong side in the policy. We did actions trying to disrupt them and so on and so forth. And now I think, we're reevaluating that and figuring out what we are going to do, because the new grand strategy is likely, we call it the grand strategy. It's a basic plan that anyone in the organization, whether they're, in California or New York, Florida, Illinois, or Kansas, is autonomous within our 12 principles that sort of lay out what is Democracy Spring and what is it not. And you don't have to get somebody's permission to do something if it's consistent with those 12 principles. And included within that is a basic strategy for how we're going to win. These are the basic steps. And so we're finalizing that new strategy now, but it's likely to include two major areas of work. One is kind of defensive, because now the basic norms of democracy are under threat from Trump and the GOP's attacks on voting rights, to the rule of law, checks and balances, Constitution, freedom of speech, down the line, right? That we've got to resist that and be in solidarity on all those fronts where they're trying to take us backwards. But at the same time, in terms of moving forward, we see the path to that is to take over the Democratic Party and force them to break with big money.
Sorry, I have a dog.
That's okay. Dogs are part of the revolution.
Exactly.
We've got to force the Democrats to make a decision. Are they going to be you can't be a party of Wall Street and party of the people at the same time, So we want to force them to have to take a side in terms of how they're going to fund their organization and their campaigns. And there needs to be a standard that lets if somebody's running for office, right, what side they've taken there, And so we've got to do some work to define exactly what that is, because if it constrains your ability to raise money too extreme, and too extreme a manner, then it's going to make it hard for you to compete in the current system, right? But it's got to meet the sort of smell test, so that any voter out there, if they see that, they're like, oh yeah, I know where this person stands. And I think people felt that about Bernie Sanders, the way he was running and funding his campaign. Can you replicate that, for every congressional race? So there's some questions to answer, but we got to hit the sweet spot on that. But once that's there and we're clear about it, then we got to hit them and say, you're either on this or you're not. And if you're not, then you're making it clear that you're going to represent the big donors and the corporate interests and so on, and not the voters within the Democratic Party who want you. So once that's there, we'll have a list around that, and everybody can help us build it and help us hold accountable the folks that are not willing to be on the right side, and then lift up those that are. And, we want to help build a Tea Party of the left, right? That it brings together all the folks who kind of are organically coming, I think, to a lot of the same strategy, whether you look at Cenk and the Justice Democrats or Our Revolution and what Bernie's doing, to all of us and the Nurses Union and groups like Progressive Democrats of America that have been on that tip for a while. And it's expanding kind of a universe of folks that see there's no reason why we need a party that is going to fight for everyday people. We know that, and that's part of the history of the Democratic Party, and that's where all the voters are now. So there's no reason that that can't be what that party is a vehicle for, except for that there's a donor class and elites established within the party who are wedded to that system that have a lot of institutional control right now. But when you really zoom out and look at all the people that are necessary for the Democrats to compete in a national election, the voters, most importantly, the grassroots activists, the small donors, the volunteers, that group of people that's opposed, to us being a truly progressive party is tiny. It's tiny.
Senator Claire McCaskill had said something like, they're just in a condescending way that the liberals are just the Tea Party of the left, meaning they're hostile and they're taking over. And I actually thought of it completely different. I was like, no, 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 no. You guys are the minority. You're the ones who came up in the early, 90s, late 80s, changed the entire strategy of the Democratic Party, and made it about raising money, getting money to consultants, and representing corporate interests. You're the ones who did that, and you did well, basically for a couple cycles, like one congressional cycle and another one 10 years later. But they don't have a really good track record. And now you have over half the party, in my opinion, of the establishment. We're talking union leaders, we're talking organizers, people who've been part of the party for a long time, saying, no, 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 this is not the party we want. Plus, as you said, all the voters. So if you look at it, it's actually, they're the Tea Party. They're the minority. And they've been holding the party hostage and taking away from its true values. Whereas, the workers, the people, my favorite is, it's like they use identity politics as a stamp. And the reality is that if you really do believe in equality for all, you would talk about economics. And you know that as an organizer. And Martin Luther King wrote about it, from his jail cell, that you can't have equality in race if you don't talk about the economics that drive these things. And I think, that's why what you guys are doing is so powerful and so needed. And you've been doing it for a couple of years now. And you have, what I love is that you're constantly innovating ways to disrupt in a peaceful way, and you're very committed to that. And as I know, you're going off on a retreat yourself in a couple days. So
spiritual boot camp coming up for me, to get ready for the struggle ahead. No, you're absolutely right. When I say Tea Party of the left, I just mean that taking a page in some ways from that strategy, right? That they didn't try to start their own party, that they said, no, we're going to lay down the law, we're going to fight, we're going to disrupt within, in primaries and protests across the board, to say this is what the Republican Party needs to be. Except in our case, we're doing it for much better values, with more support ultimately in the country, more truth on our side. But I think we've got to have the courage, and the willingness to really stand up, that I think hasn't been there as much. If we got to occupy the DNC headquarters, let's roll. As long as it's nonviolent, Yeah.
I've been saying that for like a year.
Wait, say what?
I've been saying that for like a year. I'm like,
what?
To occupy the DNC.
Oh, great.
I'm giving them one last chance, and that's their new, the last chance for me. And everyone's like, when are you going to give up on the DNC? It's not that I'm giving up, because the numbers are there. The numbers are definitely there. When you look at when the DNC membership, which was all elected pretty much before Bernie Sanders ran for office, for president, when those members almost took the scale for Keith Ellison, there's a sea change there. Why would you give up at that moment? You can move those 20 DNC members and clear out. Those are the people who need to be primaried. Some of those DNC members have been there for 30 years. A lot of them are making money off of being in the DNC and aren't disclosing their conflicts of interests. In any other company or boardroom, that would be against the rules. In office, you have to go through ethics. You have to disclose all of your ties, and there's a lot of ethics laws. But somehow in the Democratic Party, God forbid they actually disclose things like that. Kai, thank you. This was awesome.
Great to be with you.
Do you guys
Thank you
have
so
anything
much.
coming up that we can look forward to?
Like I said, in terms of major kind of campaigns or actions, we're in the planning stage right now. But what we pulled off last year, I think, is a harbinger of powerful things to come. So I'll leave it at that and say, if folks have ideas and are ready, and believe in the vision that we share, we want to work with you wherever you are across the country.
Awesome. Hi, Newkirk. He is the co-founder of Democracy Spring, and always a pleasure. Mission, what is it called? Mission strategist, mission director.
Mission director, that's what we say. It just means I do the dishes. Just means I'm always the guy who does the dishes. But yes, it's an emergency moment for our country, but I have a lot of hope because people power wins at the end of the day, and that's what we're about building, and y'all are about lifting that up at the Young Turks. So we're so thankful to you, and always great to be with you, Nomiki.
Thank you, Kai. Have a good day.
See you soon.